Hey folks, if you've ever seen any of my ITX coverage over the last couple of years, then you'll be pretty familiar with the X370 Fatal1ty ITX board from ASRock. It's been the staple in many a build, and the 300 series Fatal1ty lineup is still one of those AM4 ITX boards that can be consistently found for sale here in the UK. The one thing it is lacking these days though is a connection for addressable RGB. Now that's not a huge deal in many builds, but the lack of addressable RGB headers does mean that if you're looking for a fully built, fully lit ITX Ryzen build on the cheap, then the 300 series boards just won't do. So with that in mind, let's take a look at my new ITX option, the newer B450 Fatal1ty ITX board. Now opening the box we get a quick installation guide, the I/O shield, 2 SATA data cables, an M.2 screw and 2 individual Wi-Fi antennas, along with the obligatory coaster. Now I know what you're thinking off the bat, this looks suspiciously similar to your current X370 Fatal1ty board. And you wouldn't be wrong in thinking that, but there are a few differences worth noting if you're juggling between the two, so let's go through them. The rear I/O is the first place we see some minor changes. We get 2 antenna ports, the keyboard mouse port, 1 HDMI port, 1 DisplayPort 1.2, the optical out, 2 USB 2.0 ports, 1 USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type A port, 1 3.1 Gen 2 Type C port, and 2 3.1 Gen 1 ports, along with the HD audio jacks and the Gigabit Ethernet. The DisplayPort here replaces one of the HDMI ports found on the 300 series boards. While the USB layout is the same, we do get a bump up to USB 3.1 Gen 2 on 2 of the ports, instead of the 3.1 Gen 1 we've seen on the 300 series. On the board itself, we get 1 LPC header, 1 addressable LED header, 1 AMD fan LED header, 1 CPU fan connector, an additional 2 PWM headers for chassis fans or water pumps, the 24-pin ATX power connector and a supplemental 8-pin, the front panel audio connectors, another AMD LED fan USB header, a single USB 2.0 header, and a single USB 3.1 Gen 1 header on the board. The main addition here compared with the 300 series boards is the inclusion of that addressable RGB header, but there's also a couple of tweaks when it comes to the fan headers. On my old X370 board, there were 2 standard 1A fan headers and 1 more beefy 1.5A 4-pin header, which can supply a little bit more juice to a water pump or a more power hungry fan. With the B450 Fatal1ty in contrast, we're only offered a single 1A fan header for CPU cooling, and the board offers 2 additional 2A fan headers instead. A nice addition there, adding some flexibility to use some more power hungry kit for your cooling, and especially nice when you consider the even high-end X570 boards from other manufacturers often stick with 1A headers throughout. You still get 4 SATA 3 ports on the board, and also a multi-type M.2 slot in the rear. This slot is capable of handling PCIe Gen 3 NVMe drives, as well as the slower M.2 SATA 3 drives. The wireless LAN solution on the B450 Fatal1ty is the same as we found on the B350, which means a theoretical max speed of 433 megabits per second. Now the X370 and X470 boards, they support double this speed. But as always, you're likely going to be bottlenecked by your ISP or your router speed rather than the chip itself, so it's probably not an issue for the vast majority of users. On the audio side, we retain the ALC 1220 audio codec as before. It's a fine offering for most users, and the inclusion of Creative Sound Blaster Cinema 5 support is up from version 3, which was seen on the 300 series boards. Now when it comes to power delivery, this remains the same as on the 300 series. We get the same 8 virtual phase design, which is actually a twin 3-phase for the V-core with 2 individual phases for the SoC, meaning good support for APUs. There are a few B450 boards out there which only offer a single phase for APU graphics power, so to see 2 individual phases is actually really good at this price. While 3 phases on the V-core will likely mean that the maximum OC potential may be a bit more limited, the doubling of components will mean that heat is more evenly dissipated, and in an ITX build, heat removal is often going to be the key concern rather than that extra 50 to 100 MHz of clock speed when running at the ragged edge. It's the same VRM design as used on the 300 series boards, and I've had absolutely no issues with those over the last 2 years or so, even when running high core count CPUs. Now we do get a larger heatsink than on the 300 series for the V-Core VRM, which is great to see, although having anything at all on the SoC would have been better than what we got. With that said though, even with minimal airflow, the VRM as a whole is going to be enough for even a stock 3950X, so we'd have no issues at all with chips at the lower end of the stack. So that is the Fatal1ty B450 ITX board in a nutshell, an evolution rather than revolution of the 300 series boards that I'm quite fond of, making good additions where it matters with better I/O, better VRM cooling, upgraded fan headers, the addition of ARGB functionality, and a change away from the traditional red Fatal1ty colour scheme to a more muted matte black, so it should match in with a lot more builds this time around. The final part of the equation here is the price. Here in the UK, the B450 ITX boards from ASRock are in abundant stock for around the £100 mark online, while the B450 version is going to set you back maybe an extra 10 to 15% on top of that. So it's still one of the cheaper, fully loaded B450 ITX offerings. It ticks all the boxes, and having extensively tested out its predecessor, there's nothing in the component choice of this board that is cause for concern. A good upgrade over the 300 series board and a good ITX board all round, but I wouldn't be going out upgrading my B450 ITX board unless you really wanted that ARGB functionality. If however you were building from scratch and you were looking for a really good value ITX board and didn't want to spend a fortune, it's certainly one that I would be looking at. I have a few ITX builds in mind over the next couple of weeks, so we're going to be seeing a lot more of this board very soon, but for now I'll leave it there and just say thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the comment section down below and in the next video.